everybody. Welcome back. The 90-day no talk experiment. We're on day 71. You guys, we are quickly moving through. So day 71, I'm excited. My prayer, I always feel like is that something that I share is helpful, beneficial to someone. I always say, eat the meat, spit out the bones. You may not get everything, or everything may not be applicable to you, but take the things that are applicable to you. Hey, ma'am, how are you? Take the things that are applicable to you and apply them to your life. And then once you've done that, gauge your growth, gauge where you have come from, right? We always want to think about where the Lord has brought us, because a lot of us we've come from a mighty long way. And so I think for me, that's the most important part, is to look back at where I was to where I am now and see just how far God has brought me, and to be okay with where I am, even if that growth is slower than I would like. I'm not as far along as I would like, or I may not be as far along as other people think I should be. But when I go back and think, I have progressed. Hey now, how are you? So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. We're jumping right in. We are doing my book, The 90-Day No Talk Experiment. If anybody is interested in getting the book, you can find this on Amazon. And we are on day 71. All right. So day 71 is called A Birthday. Now, in this book, if you haven't noticed, I've been sharing little bits and pieces of my life. Some of you know the story. Some of you have been following me on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube for a very long time. And if you haven't and you're new to the crew, just go and look around Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, look all the places, and you'll be able to find out just a little bit about me. While it may not give you the full it may not give you full context, it will give you kind of a bird's eye view into who I am and who we are as a family and what we believe and how the Lord has brought us to this place, right? So again, I always look at progress. Progress is very good. So this day is called A Birthday. And in these pages, in the pages of the book, and there are quite a few pages of this book, but you find lots of pieces of my story, lots of pieces. And most people would think they know you, but you only know a little bit of people. You don't have the full breadth of or depth of a person, but you can learn, right? So I'm going to just read this out of the book, and then I'm going to jump in and kind of add some things. I'm on page 50 if you have the book and you're following along. Today is my mother's birthday. So evidently I wrote this on May 24th of 2022. You may not know Beauty, and she had this, her name was Beauty, and I was Cutie. Or whoever called her phone would be Cutie, because she would answer the phone, hey, Cutie, this is Beauty. Every time, most people are like, hello. She's like, hey, Cutie, this is Beauty. So that is how she would answer her phone. She was affectionately called Beauty. Beauty, or Susie, was my mother, a 17-year-old teenager that had a little Afro-Latina baby that no one knew about until the day she started having labor pains. Yep. I was unnoticed until I was well on the way. So nobody knew except my father that my mother was pregnant. They were 16 when they got pregnant, 17 when I was born. And so here it was, right? She was so thin. My mother was very, very thin. She had no meat on her bones at all. Always was tiny. And I don't know how she managed to hide a pregnancy, but she did. And nobody knew until she was in the shower one day and started having pains, labor pains. And so, of course, at that point, you got to kind of let the cat out of the bag, or spill the beans, and let everybody know what's going on. And when they get her over to the hospital, lo and behold, hello, here I am, right? I was born on February the 5th, but we aren't sure if that was my real birthday. I was premature. We don't know how premature. I was 4 pounds and 7 ounces. I told this story last night. My dad talked about being able to hold me in the palm of his hand. I was so small. We don't know if she received any prenatal care. We don't know what was going on during the pregnancy. We just don't have any of those answers. But what does that have to do with her birthday? My mother was born and had me, but she didn't care for me. She was unable to care for me. At 17, how much can you really care for a child? How much do you really know about yourself as a 17-year-old, as a teenage parent? You really don't. How do you know that, Shakima? Because I was a teenage parent. I got pregnant when I was 13 through a series of circumstances that were not mine to give consent. And then I became pregnant and decided to keep my child. And I was a parent at 14. I've affectionately been parenting for 34 years. I have a 34, well, my daughter will be 34 next week. She'll be 34 next week. In a few days. It's not even a few days. Today's the 21st. Yep, she'll be 34 in 4 days. And so I can identify with my mom not knowing how to parent a child. I'm not even sure if she wanted a child. I mean, who wants a child? I knew she loved my dad, and my dad loved her as best as he could. But I don't know if they were equipped to have a baby. She couldn't care for me, so I was taken to live with my grandparents when I was 10 years old. Throughout my life, I've often thought about my mama. She lived her life and I lived mine, and never the two shall meet. They never crossed paths. We were like two ships passing in the night. And I think sometimes people get very confused about relationships, right? We'll say, well, that's your mom. And just because she birthed me doesn't necessarily make a person your parent. It's the person who parents you. If anybody were to ask me who my parents were, I very heavily identified my grandparents as my parents. I knew they were my grandparents, but they were there with me through everything in my life. They parented me. For the first 5 years of my life, my grandparents we all lived together with my mom. And so here I was, this baby that my grandparents, for all intents and purposes, took control over. And then the same was true for my father's parents. Here I was. I would go see my dad and end up with his parents and his older sister. Those were the people who raised me. Again, no slight to my parents. They did the best they knew how to do at 17. She lived her life. I lived mine, never for the two to cross until she was in the last 60 days of her life. When I got the call that my mama was sick, I remember I was on my way home from a work conference. I was working in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was an executive assistant for 11 years and of an association that I was a member of. And I became the executive assistant, and I was the executive assistant for 11 years. And I got the call that she had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I didn't know how to rationalize that in my mind. Now you have to understand, I'm a singleton. I have no siblings from my mom. I have siblings from my father, but I have no siblings from my mother. There were no more babies, none. It was just me. And so here I am now finding out my mom has stage 4 lung cancer. And that means in that moment, every decision falls on you because you are her next of kin. She doesn't have a husband. She never got married. She loved my dad her whole entire life, but she never got married. And here I am having this woman who, in a sense, gave me away or allowed me to be taken away. She didn't come and get me. So she allowed me to be taken away. And now I'm getting a phone call. Now, I got the phone call that she was sick probably about 2 or 3 years before she passed. But here I am. So I did what all normal people do. I grieved in that moment, and then I kept living my life. She was living. She was getting her treatment. She was doing all the things. She didn't need me. She was great. She was good, right? My mom was always self-sufficient. My mom worked. A lot of you see me on the different videos and stuff. You go, Shakima, you always working. Every time I see you, you working. My grandparents had a work ethic. My mom had a work ethic. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, has the same work ethic. My mom would work. And so that's, I guess, the one thing I inherited from her, my grandparents as well. But she didn't need me. Her life was set. She was good. All was well. Why should I do anything for her in these last 60 days? So now these last 60 days, my aunt calls me in the middle of the night and tell me she fell, and the rescue people had to break into her house and get her and take her over to the hospital because she could not get up off the floor, and she was screaming in there. And one of her neighbors finally heard her in her house and called 911, and they came and picked her up. Well, what ended up happening was the cancer was now metastasizing, and it was moving to her bones. She got up to go to the bathroom, and the bones were so brittle that it broke, and she fell, and she could not get herself up. It had not only moved to her hip bone or her femur bone, whatever the longest one, whatever the long one at the top is in her leg, that bone. And then it was in her shoulder, and it was in her brain. So she had a tumor in her brain. We kept noticing that she would end up places she wasn't supposed to be. And you couldn't figure out why she was there, or she would think things were happening that were not happening. She ended up having like psychosis, which she just thought things were happening that were not happening. Even after she had the brain surgery to remove the tumor, she never bounced back from that. She thought Ronald Reagan was still president. When they would come in and do the neurological checks, and she was in ICU for a long time. Nobody would, they couldn't explain it. They couldn't fix it. And pretty much what they said is, there's nothing more we can do. She's had all these rounds of chemo. It's time to send her home, and we're going to contact hospice. Well, my mom lived alone. She didn't have anybody. I'm 3 hours away from where she lived with my family, with my kids. It was just me and my kids. Who's going to take care of her? And all of the family members look at me. Now, you have to understand, my mom and I were estranged from each other for about 25 years until this time. We'd see each other here and there, whatever the case, but we were not together. She lived a very different lifestyle than what I wanted to have involved in my life for the lives of my children. And I just would not allow it. I grew up with you. I know what this life is like. My children will never experience this. Never experience this. Not if I got anything to say about it. But here's the doctor now saying, there's nothing more we can do. We've done the surgery. It hasn't helped. She hasn't bounced back. She's not going to be able to live on her own. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want her in my home. And I'm saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized with the evidence of speaking in tongues. I love Jesus, but I don't want her in my house. I don't want her in my space. This is my space. This is where I come to have my peace of mind. This is why I live so far away, because I don't want to be involved with your lifestyle. I don't do any of the things that you do. And I don't. Now, let me say this, because I don't want people to think harmly of me. I mean, you can think whatever you want. It is what it is. When my grandfather was sick with a stroke, he could have come and lived here for the rest of his life if he wanted to. When my grandmother was ill, if she had have survived, she could have lived here for as long as she wanted to. I would have taken care of them. I would have washed their rear ends. I would have changed their diapers. I would have done it all. But when it came down to my birth mother, I struggled with that decision. Now, judge if you want, but you don't know all the things. When it came down to that decision, I had to say to God, I don't want to do this. And the Lord said to me, take her home. And who argues with the Lord? Who argues with the Lord? I've learned not to argue with God. God said, take her home. He said, show her what family looks like. My mom always claimed to love me. She would tell me that, I love you, I love you. But I had no emotional attachment to my mother. When I was born, she didn't even take care of me. One of her sisters took care of me. When I was 10, I got taken away. We had no emotionalness. There was none of that. And so here I am, hearing the voice of the Lord say, take her home and show her what family looks like. And then you have a decision to make. You have to determine if you trust God more than you don't trust her. And I have a solid track record with the Lord. Solid. God has never forsaken me. He's never left me. He's never left me out. He's never given me away. He's never left me on my own. He's never left me up to my own devices. And so I had to take him at his word. Isn't it just like God to give us another chance, or what I would call a do-over, if you will, for the things we feel we have already failed? And what did I fail at? I failed at being a daughter. I was not a good daughter at all. At all. I wanted nothing to do with my mom. Nothing. I had parents who were good to me. I had my other grandparents who were good to me. My grandparents were excellent to me. As bad as my childhood was, it was still the best it could have ever been comparative to living with my mom. And I'll take that to my grave. That it was the best it could have ever been comparative to that lifestyle. She was out there doing all her things. No slight to her, but it was her life. But God was giving me another chance to make things right, even though I didn't want the opportunity. My older children had already left the home, so I had the little kids to think about. And I was like, God, do I really want to bring her here with my little kids? But I knew here she could not get to the things, the vices that she had in her life. There's nothing here that was going to get her out of her mind. She was already out of it enough as it was. But there was nothing here that was going to numb her pain. There was nothing here that was going to allow her to escape. She had to live in the reality of what her life was like. And here we were. Not because I didn't love Beauty. I wasn't a failure because I didn't love her. I was a failure because our family wasn't picture perfect. And I always had this complex of trying to be picture perfect. I always had this thing that I had to do everything right, because if I did everything right, people wouldn't leave me. If I did everything right, people would love me. If I did everything right, I wouldn't have to come home by myself. If I did everything right, I had this perfectionist complex. And so I kept thinking, okay, I didn't do it all right, God, and you want me to do it again? He said, yep, you're going to take her home and you're going to show her exactly what life should have been like for y'all. And it just was, it was like, okay, if that's what you want me to do, that's what I'm doing. No person could have told me to take her. It had to be the Lord to tell me to take her, because I trust him with all that I am. I trust him. And so I did that. But what I had in my heart was not necessarily human love for my mom, but it was a love for the Father. It was a love for God, knowing that no matter what I was going to face with my mother for however long God had given her left, that he was going to be there with me. If you go to your Bible, to Joel 2:25 in the Amplified Classic, it says, and I will restore or replace for you the years that the locusts have eaten, the hopping locust, the stripping locust, and the crawling locust, my great army which I sent among you. Verse 26 says, you will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be ashamed. And when the Lord said he would restore all that I had lost, I was like, okay. In short, the Lord allowed me and my mother to come back together for a short amount of time for us to be family. Our family didn't work, but the family that I created was working enough for her to be able to see what it would have been like had it been her and I. Because that's what she would always say. It's you and I. Well, it was me and her friends and her men and her alcohol and whatever else. It was all of us. And that wasn't a life I was willing to live with her. But I had created something, even though that wasn't picture perfect. Single mom, divorced. What do I have to offer? And God was like, you can show her family. She was able to see how we love one another and what family should actually be. She even had a chance to be around my children, something that would never happen before with my younger children. Because of her lifestyle, I just couldn't do it. And she loved them. She even loved my dog, y'all. She tried to steal my dog, and I almost put her out for that. She would look at Gracie, because we didn't have the little dog then, and she would say, come here, Gracie. Come over here and be with me. And Gracie would just go right on over, and she would just rub up against my mom, and my mom would just rub her head. She didn't even like dogs. Here she is trying to steal the affections of my dog. And most people would think, oh, everything was well, but it was not well. Every day she was here, she treated me bad. She talked harshly to me. She ordered me around like I was her servant. She called me fat. She did all of the things that she could do to let me know that she was not pleased with anything about me. But my children she loved. And I had to live through that. And I had to be all of those things, even though I was still facing some backlash from her. Fix my food. Where's my coffee? Get me this. Get me that. What do you? I'm like, oh God, oh God. And we didn't have an extra bedroom for her. And I didn't want her to be all the way across the house. So we shared a bedroom. And at 3 a.m, 2 a.m, she would be, oh, Mom, oh, I'm in pain. Oh, and I'm dead sleep. And I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God. And I wake up not knowing what is going on. And she's in pain. And now I got to minister to her. And now I got to give her the medication that she doesn't want. She's fighting me for the medication. But it's what's going to make her at least relieve the pain for a little while. And I still have to work in the morning. And I still have to do all of the things that I have to do to take care of my family. But every night we would sit down at the table and eat dinner together. And we would get her up and she would come and sit at the table and she would eat dinner with us. She wouldn't eat a lot, but she would eat. Or if she wanted something, I would make that. Every day she got to see my kids and I interact with each other, and we would do all the things y'all see. Your kids are so helpful. Your kids do all the things. She would get to see all of that. She'd get to hear us laugh with each other. She'd get to hear us do all of the things that we never did. She and I never did. I took care of my mom for 60 days. It was more like 90 days. I believe it was 3 months. She passed in September. And I got her, I got the call in March, but she went to rehab for just a little while. And then she came with us. It was probably summer. So June. And I think I was out of school at the time. And then she passed in September. This was in 19 before COVID. I couldn't have made it through COVID, y'all. It would have never happened. So I've shared all of that to say God is a restorer of the things. He's a restorer of the relationships. He's a restorer of all the things that we never think can be restored. I was looking for some scripture because I wanted to share that with you all. So let me go to the scripture that I found. Because a lot of times you have to have scripture to back up the things that you do in your life. If you want to know what restoration means, it's the action of returning something to a former owner, place, or condition. He is the God of restoration. He fully restores us. Isn't that what the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross was? It was a restoration between man and God, because Adam had severed that relationship pretty much. And here's the Lord, right, restoring us back to himself. And here's the Lord giving me an opportunity to be restored back with my mom, and giving my mom an opportunity to be restored back to me. And it all worked out. Again, she didn't particularly care for me, but she cared about my children. She cared about her grands. She cared about the dog. She loved her sisters and her siblings, her brothers, and all that. She had her friends. She had all the people. So it was all good. It was all good. And it's like, okay, how do I navigate this with her? And it wasn't something that I could navigate. It was something that I had to navigate with the Lord. So if you go to Psalm 71, we're going to go to Psalm 71. The things that happen. The people who show up. Oh my goodness. I gotta have some moderators. Ay, ay, ay. I gotta have some moderators. There we go. Okay. Psalm 71, 20 and 21. If you don't believe that the Lord can restore, he can restore, and he also restores your peace. Though you have made me see trouble, many and bitter, you will restore my life again from the depths of the earth. You will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once more. So the Lord can be that restoration. The Lord can provide that restoration in any relationship, whether it's you and your child, or you and your parent, or you and your ex, or you and whomever, you and your sister, you and your siblings, whomever. God can restore. We already read the Job 2:25. Zechariah 9:12 says, return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. Prisoners of hope. I'd rather be a prisoner of hope than a prisoner of anything else and anywhere else. So for me, that's what it is. I believe in Jesus. Paul always called himself a prisoner of Jesus, a bond slave of Jesus, a servant of Jesus. I'd rather be a prisoner of Jesus than anybody else. If you would go to 2 Corinthians 13, 9 through 11, we are glad whenever we are weak, but you are strong. And our prayer is that you may be fully restored. This is why I write these things when I am absent, that when I come, I may not have to be harsh in my use of authority, the authority the Lord gave me for building you up, not tearing you down. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice. Strive for full restoration. Encourage one another. Be of one mind. Live in peace. And the God of love and peace will be with you. That was always the thing, was for us to live in peace, to strive for peace, to encourage each other, to always try to find that Renee, it's 11 through 13, to find that semblance of restoring, even when we don't know how to do it. I didn't know how to bring my mom in. I didn't know how to, I didn't know how he was going to, I didn't know how to restore the relationship. All I knew was that he could restore the relationship. And even if he didn't, see, here's the thing about trusting God. Even if my relationship was not restored, she knew what a family looked like. She knew what the love of God felt like, because we had to take care of her. We had to physically take care of her. We had to do all of the things. Towards the very end of things, it got really difficult, where she was really not able to walk on her own. She would fall down quite often. and those types of things. And so I was very in awe of what God could do through a willing vessel, right? Because I had to remember what I did for my mom had nothing to do with me. It was, if you do this for the least of these, I had to do for her what she couldn't do. How is it that I can say I'll help somebody else, but not my mom? And I had to do it. It was my obligation. It was my reasonable service, honestly, because I didn't look at it as serving my mom. I looked at doing all things as unto the Lord. I looked at it as service to God. And because I was fully committed, fully convinced that God was going to bless the efforts, whether she received it or not, I did it just for that. There was a couple more. Restoration, some similar words to restoration are repair, fix, to mend, to refurbish. Those are some similar words to restoration. So if you need Jesus to come in and repair a relationship, if you need him to fix it, if you need him to recondition it, if you need him to refurbish it, he will. We just have to be willing to allow him to do it. I have to not think about me in the moments and how this is going to make me feel. I was very thankful towards the very end because I don't know that I could have necessarily handled her passing in my home. I guess I could have. It would have been what it would have. It would have been what it was. But we were able to take her to a facility for the last few days of her life, and that's where she passed. But I was there when she passed, and my hand was in her hand when she passed. And I felt her spirit leave her body. And in that moment, as a daughter, I knew I had done all I could do. And that was it. That was all I could do. And I think what my children were able to see, because whenever you have fractured relationships, you cannot think that you're not going to have them in other areas. And so what I was able to do was show my children self-sacrifice. I was able to show them what giving of yourself looked like. I was able to show them I've given it everything I had. This is 100% all in, and they were able to see that. And so perhaps, should I get to the end of my life and my children have to care for me, maybe they'll know what it looks like. Maybe they won't. I always pray for good health, so none of my children will have to sacrifice any of their life for me. I don't want that for them. I am not working on a book about forgiveness. The Lord has not put that in my heart. So, but there are plenty of them out there. Not one that I want to write at the moment, but no, I don't think I'm the resident expert on that. Although I have forgiven, I have total forgiveness in my heart towards my mom. I understand that people do what they know, or people do what they're familiar with. Right before my mom went for brain surgery, my aunt and I had an opportunity to lead her in the prayer of salvation. And that was very encouraging, that she could accept the Lord and knew God. She always knew who she was. I don't think she identified with him personally as her Lord and Savior. And so we were able to do that. And so whether she and I reconciled or not, the more important job or task was for her and the Lord to reconcile, for her and God to be right, so that she could enter into his eternal rest and not have to worry about, soul salvation. Where was she going after she passed? She wasn't sure. Neither of us were sure if she would wake up even from the brain surgery. And so when she did wake up from the brain surgery, we were thankful. But of course, she had already said the prayer of salvation with us, and that was a good thing for us. So I'm here to tell you that the Lord can restore. I think on her birthday, probably that year, I was able to share things about my mom, and my heart was at peace. Even today, my heart is at peace. I tell my stories not to express the hurt or the anger or the bitterness or all of that. I was never angry or bitter at my mom. I just didn't want a relationship with somebody I didn't know. That was the only thing. I didn't know her. What I knew of her was not nice. It wasn't the things I wanted to write home about or tell anybody else about. I just didn't want to have that as a part of my adult life. And I definitely didn't want my children around it. So I never had anger, hatred, bitterness, none of that. It was just, we didn't know each other. Because even though she was physically my mom, she birthed me, we were not together. It was no different than being adopted, right? While people would say, well, this is your birth mom, and I get that, but she didn't raise me. This is my mom. That's what people, when you get those situations, say, well, this is my mom. Hey, I want you to meet. They telling the birth mother, hey, this is my mom and my dad, because those individuals. So that was the thing. It was like, I don't know her. I don't know her tendencies, her proclivities. I don't know her idiosyncrasies. I don't know anything about her. What am I supposed to do with this person? And God was like, you do what I would do. And that's how I had to frame it in my mind. And even in that, God restored. So this whole section about her birthday, because I was able to share about her birthday and not feel any type of way except peace in my heart and my spirit. Now, to be very transparent, her and my older daughter were thick as thieves. You would have thought they were parent and child, and I was nobody. You would have thought that they were mom and daughter, and I was just like nobody. And it was perfectly fine. God gave her a do-over as well. She got to help, be around my older daughter way more than any of my younger children. And so that was good for my mom. She needed to parent again some type of a way, even though she couldn't parent me. And I'll tell you this with much pride in my heart. My mom would tell you, oh God, help me. Help me. My mom would tell you, and anybody else, my child never gave me one day of problems. I didn't give my mom problems. I wasn't that kid. I didn't go out and do stuff I wasn't supposed to do. I wasn't in places I wasn't supposed to. I just didn't do. It wasn't in my heart. It wasn't a part of my makeup. It still isn't, and I don't. But even though we didn't have that relationship, she would always tell people she never gave me one moment of problems. And I didn't. Why was I going to give her problems? She already had enough. She already had enough of her own. Why would I want to add to that? It was not anything that I couldn't give her more on her plate. It was enough when I had the baby and all of that. That was a whole nother level and layer. But even in that, I didn't want her to have to take on any of that. So I took on all of that on me. Y'all don't treat her any type of way. You want to treat me some type of way, treat me some type of way. It's perfect. It's fine. I'm not a martyr either. I'm not saying I was perfect in everything, but I did what I needed to do when I needed to do it. And I just believed that God was going to be with me. He was going to protect me. He was going to keep me in my right mind while I was doing all of the things that she needed done. And at the end of the day, when she took her last breath, I was there. We were hand in hand. And that was the end of that. It was the end. And I'm very thankful for that. So all of that to say, if you are looking for restoration, if you desire it, or you're not even sure if that's what you need, just go to God and ask him. God is so very faithful to teach us all the things. He can teach us how to serve even those we don't want to serve. He can teach us how to love those we don't want to love. I still don't have a human love for my mom. It's just not a thing. Doesn't mean I disrespect her or any of those other things. but that emotional bond, that attachment is not there. Love her with the love of the Lord. I do. But my grandparents were my people, and they were my people. And I love them with everything I have, with all that I am. And I'm so in awe of them and what they did, not only for me, but 5 granddaughters. They had 15 of their own children and they raised 5 granddaughters, 5 additional grands. And I was one of them. And so they showed me selflessness. Why would I not in turn show it back to somebody else? So anywho, restoration is yours to have if you choose it, and you have to choose it. He will allow it, but you have to choose it. And then you have to let it go, all the things. Again, I have to share stories so that it can be real for you, what I went through. But I have no ill will. I harbor no bitterness, no anger, no hate. In my whole life, with everybody that has ever done something to me, there have been a few. I 100% do not hold any harbor, any anger, any bitterness, any ill will. And can I tell you what that is? That is a restoration that only comes from the Lord. Because I did have anger and bitterness and rage and all the things. I had all the things you could list. You listed, I had it. You listed, I had it. And here's the thing. I asked God to take it from me. I didn't want it. I didn't want to be at odds with him. And I didn't want to be at odds with people. And I choose and chose then and choose now not to be at odds with people. I had my ex-mother-in-law. I even knew after I got divorced, because she's been sickly for a long time. But I even told her, and I've been divorced from her son now. Jackson will be 15 years, 14 years been divorced, separated 15 years. If her family needed me to take her, I'd take her. And she's not even my mother-in-law anymore. She has another daughter-in-law. He remarried. But I told her if I needed to take her, I would. And I told her family if I needed to. If y'all needed me to do that, I would have done it and still will. Why? Because the Lord would allow me and help me to be able. And he allowed that relationship to be restored. She and I didn't have the best relationship. She and I did not, my ex-in-laws didn't always have the best relationship. But the Lord has allowed a restoration. He's allowed total and complete restoration. And if he can do it for me, why would he not want to do it for you? I don't see that he would just pick me and not pick anybody else, because God is not like that. He'll pick all of us if we allow him to. So as I do with every night, I always want to ask you, do you know him? Do you know Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior? Do you know him as the author and finisher of your faith? Do you know him as the Redeemer? Do you know him as restoration? Do you know him as the person that hides you under the shelter of his wing? Do you know him as your safety and strong tower that you can run into and be safe? Do you know him as all of those things? Do you know him as peace? And if you don't, you can. You start with salvation. Romans 10:9-10 is your source verse for salvation. You can be restored. He'll restore your years just like he restored mine. And I'm believing that for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out here that have relationships. They have parents they haven't spoken to in years. Siblings they haven't spoken to in years. All of that. And the Lord is faithful. If you ask, he is faithful to restore. So anywho, you guys, I want to thank you all so much for stopping by. I want to thank you so much for being with me and for hanging out, listening to my stories. And you know, joining me, mourning with me when I mourn, celebrating me when I celebrate, all the things. I appreciate you. If you don't mind, thumb up the video, share it if you feel like it's worth sharing. Tomorrow night, Friday Night Live, we're doing day 70, the blessings of the Lord. The blessings of the Lord. Our day is day 70. So if for some reason you want to get the book, it's the 90-Day No Talk Experiment by Shakima Wilson. You can find, same Yolanda, thank you so much. This is on Amazon. We would love for you to grab it, but it's not necessary for you to join us. Thank you again so much for stopping by. We appreciate you. We love you. We're praying for full restoration over your family, your situation, your life, whatever situation you have. We're in agreement with heaven that the Lord is going to put it back the way it should have been. He's going to restore the years, all the years, not just one, but all of them. And you're going to have plenty to eat, and you're going to know that he's never left you. I love you guys. I hope to see you soon. Bye now. Bye, y'all.